Michelle, do you want to just talk very briefly about you and maybe your school before we get started?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Margaret. So hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Michelle Thomas, and I'm the Director of Education here at the School of Research Science. And as you can see in the picture, it's a beautiful building. It's in Dubai. And I'm actually in the building now in my office, so you can see a few of the trees and the sun in the background. So it's a huge school. It's an all-through school. From FS1, so 3-year-olds, all the way up to 18-year-olds. We go up to year 13. So we've had a big increase in numbers. So we're just over 4,300 students, and we're actually on 2 campuses. So we have this building, which is the main building, and we have a building across the road, which is our infant building as well. So we're very lucky to have amazing facilities. A little bit about myself is I started here full-time in my role in April 2019, and I'll tell you a little bit about that story and that journey as we go on in terms of, the why we started a real push on reading. But I think a little bit of context of the school is always interesting for colleagues not here in Dubai. Or internationally, the population of the students, we serve a majority of our students. As you can see, there are local families, they're Emirati students. And so we have a huge number. 81% of our students come from the culture of our land here in the UAE. And then we have a very small percentage, 19%, that are non-Emirat. And so the majority of our students, English is not their first language. So our school delivers the British national curriculum, the English national curriculum, yet the majority are EAL speakers. So we have a challenge, from the get-go, really, in terms of language and acquisition. The age range is, as I said, 3,784 in our section. We have a US section as well. We have around 600 students that sit from grade 9. They move into, if they want to, they can go into the US. So it's got a lot of students in the building. But for us, the majority of our students, you can see there, are in our primary department. So up to year 6, and then we move into secondary, where we have a smaller number, as I said, because that's when we start to see a split staying in the UK or going over to the US curriculum. But, a little bit about that is really, really important for context and, and where we're starting from. So it's been a real journey for us, and will continue to be a journey. So today I'm just going to talk you through with Margaret some of the things we've done to put reading at the forefront. And more importantly, I'd say to you, literacy and a love of language, really, for us at our school.
So thanks for that really great backdrop. So when you started, you probably came thinking, well, what's this job going to be about? I'm sure that the directors and the people who were making the decisions about your appointment also had an agenda. And I'm sure that's been driven by something. Maybe you could fill us in a little bit about that journey. April 2019, did you say?
Correct, yeah. So, yeah, for sure. So my principal's on the call. So hi, Nan. And so I actually had been involved with the school previously in a consulting role. So previously, prior to joining here in Dubai, I was an executive principal of a group of primary schools in London, actually. So local authority schools that we'd pulled together, 3 schools that we'd made into a federation. So I'd already had some work with SRS, as we call it, in terms of the sort of the agenda of improvement and giving them support. So I would come over a couple of times a year and help in terms of sort of reviewing the school, because I'm also, in my background, I'm also an Ofsted inspector. So I still work as an OI, and we're just resuming inspections back in the UK. So, with COVID, things have been a little bit different. But I was asked to join the school full-time in April 2019 for a number of reasons. The size of the school. So for my principal here, Nan, it was a huge job. She'd seen the school grow from a very small school, a few thousand, a few hundred students, into what was becoming, a massive building. So it really was about sort of adding, the leadership dimension of the curriculum. So my role as Director of Education was really to lead on that. One of the things that brought me as well was the school had, had some challenges in terms of as the offer that they were offering students. And one of the areas the school was struggling a little bit with was how to get all of these students that English isn't their first language, and how to get them the reading culture developed in the school. And we have an annual inspection process here in Dubai, although we haven't had it due to COVID for a couple of years, so it's been a little bit different. But prior to that, you have an annual inspection, and the school had some areas to work on, I would say. So my role coming in was to really look at what was working and what could be a lot better and what could be more consistent. And I'd say that's probably the key word that myself and Nan, who's the principal, have really worked on as a team in pulling the school forward. Reading was high on the agenda because one of our, we're in the UAE, and we have what we call a national agenda, which involves us, working towards some priorities. And one of those priorities is reading across the curriculum. And the area that was getting stuck in a lot of schools, including ours, was the fact that we were being judged as really just developing. So we have a grading system about reading and reading across the curriculum. And there was only 14%, in the last inspection phase, which was 2018, 2019 here in Dubai. All the data showed that really only 14% of the schools were really where they wanted the schools to be in terms of reading. We were one of those that were working in what we call the developing stage, so where a lot of schools were working, which really wasn't good enough, and we wanted to review that. So one of my first jobs was to as an outsider, coming in, is saying, why isn't language at the heart of what we do? And I think, what it took me back to, and what I go back to a lot, is, what is the basis? What is the basics that we need to think about? And for us, we're an English national curriculum school. So for us, it's the national curriculum. And it got me thinking, really. And, like some of my colleagues here, probably, if you work in national curriculum, English national curriculum schools, you often don't get out that document. And it's something more and more over the last couple of years, I've actually started to really think,
I can imagine.
What are we doing? What are we doing? And why are we doing this? So going back to that, and I think what was the aim of the national curriculum? And this is what I talked to staff about, when I joined here, was the actual aim of the national curriculum for us is about vocabulary. And that, our job is across the whole curriculum. What had happened in that, our school, and probably many schools, is that it's suddenly this idea that reading was taught by the English department, we're an all-through school, or you only taught reading in primary during English lessons. And
yes, yeah.
I couldn't get my head around it. I thought, what, do you suddenly move to another class and no one reads and no one talks about vocabulary? But actually they didn't. And that was what, something that I thought, that's got to change. So we basically, myself and some of the leaders, I sat down and said, we've got to, language is important. Our students are EAL, even if they're not EAL, we're not doing enough for them. We're not giving enough immersion into the love of vocabulary, the love of reading, the love of sharing texts. And, we're thinking it's someone else's responsibility. So away that went. And a new mantra, that I would say has become a very consistent way for us to think, is in terms that every teacher is a literacy teacher. It's that simple, and there is no ifs or buts. So we came and we sort of nailed our philosophy on a mask, I'd say to you, was that, it sits there at SRS. All teachers are teachers of literacy. And we're really committed to that, to sort of developing literacy skills in our students and developing that across the curriculum. And reading got a boost, I would say to you, a boost out of boost. And, a picture there that is a really important one for us, for our culture as well. As I said, majority are Emirati, and reading is high on our agenda. Our school owner, created a project really called the Reading Project, and worked with, you can see there, the Vice President, Sheikh Mohammed Al Maktoum, visited our school, and you can see the students very excited to have him in the school, and it was a very important day. And I know Nan had the pleasure of meeting him and showing him around the school when he visited. And it's but what had happened was we had this little profile of reading, and then it didn't go, it didn't filter enough into everybody's ether. And so for us, we sort of nailed that, and I said it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to be part of the English teacher. It wasn't going to be part of the English lesson, and that everyone had to be a literacy teacher. So we started on a new journey, really, I'd say to you, in terms of what we did and how important it became. It became essential, and is a central feature of what we do.
It's really interesting to hear you're talking about vocabulary, language acquisition, all of those elements that if people haven't got an English teaching background, they don't necessarily recognize as being core to it. It's about, decoding really. Well, do they understand what they're reading? Well, they'll only understand what they're reading if they've got language to start that journey. And all of the way in which you've described, making everybody responsible for reading, not as a chore, but as a part of the subject, a part of the curriculum that should be enjoyed by teachers and children alike. Yeah. So what did you do? I mean, how did you've obviously set your vision out, you'd done some groundwork, you'd been working with the schools, so you had an understanding of the opportunities. What were the next steps to sort of cement that journey in place?
Okay, so the first thing we did was AR, Accelerated Reader, was actually in the secondary department. So, but it wasn't consistent. As I said, it was sitting within English. And what I was noticing as I was seeing lessons in other subject areas, the texts that were being presented to students were either too hard or too easy. And there was no thought until what actually is this student's reading age? What are you trying to get across here? And I realised because no one knew, no one shared them. We were doing these star readers. They were doing them at that point once or twice a year, but it's sort of, as I said, sat in the English department. No one did anything really with it. So the first thing we did was take it away from the English department. It wasn't accelerated reader. So, as I said, we expanded it into primary. So we have it in year 4, 5 and 6. We then did training with everybody and took it out of English responsibility, and it became something in secondary as part of form time. So it is, and they are responsible for AR. It's not the English teacher. They are responsible for making sure students access accelerated reader. They are responsible for the one, for when we do the star reader test, which we do 3 times a year. The first one of the things that I think most teachers, especially my secondary teachers, really, really found unbelievable was that reading age, and it was like a light bulb moment. And, once we gave them all their students' reading ages, in geography, when they're trying to, do text history, for example, some of the texts they were giving them, I would show them, because there's loads of sites out there where you can take a text, a bit of history from the text that they're taking, put it through, computer program, and it tells you this is a reading age of 14. I said, well, actually, let's look at your class. What's the average reading age? And they're like 12. I said, so what are we doing to facilitate? I don't want you to dumb it down. I'm not asking you not to use that text, but now that you have that knowledge, what looks different to you? And I think you saw light bulbs happening then.
Yeah.
So, and I think that was an absolute, not a groundbreaking moment, but a moment that, as I said, just lit light bulbs to teachers that aren't reading specialists, that suddenly thought, now I know why they didn't understand that. Now I know why they couldn't answer the questions, because I didn't do enough to facilitate their ability to understand that vocabulary. And I think, that was a real big important start for us here at SRS.
And of course, with reading, it's so difficult to assess, isn't it? Unless you're going to sit down and talk to every single child at every single moment that they finished a book. And so being able to sit the STAR assessment, get the right data so that children are accessing the right books with enough challenge to give them something to go for. But to your point earlier, if it's too easy, then that's just boring. And you need to have that sort of teaching and learning, intervention, and then what happens next. You also took on board Myon, I think, didn't you, in terms of a digital aspect to your teaching and learning?
I'm not embarrassed to say we took on Myon in lockdown, actually, like I imagine many of us here did. Actually, we took it on just before lockdown, to be honest with you, because we had, the numbers were growing. We couldn't get students into the library enough to change their AR books. And I think what Myon provided for us, obviously, was this digital catalogue. What we didn't know and what we do know now is how to use that digital catalogue as much more. And, I'd like to just make my friends online here understand, I was blown away by some of the things. I thought, oh, wow, I wish I'd known that in the beginning or listened a bit better, when we were first seeing Myon, because we were originally just using it as a digital library, honestly, and it was making it easier for us, especially my teachers, to, get students in the right direction. And I think now Myon is very much a whole class teaching tool. It's where my teachers go to get their text, because we've had a lot of, as I said to you, the idea of disciplinary literacy is been what we've been focusing on this year, reading like a geographer, writing like a historian. And, the one thing, we're in the middle of Dubai, you can go on Amazon, but sometimes, things are a bit expensive. So for us, Myon was a real, absolute savior for us, because it gave us a space where my teachers could go, get some text that they wanted to use, show it as a whole class text. And I think that was a big move for us as well, to try and think, actually, this is much more than just this digital library. So colleagues here, if you haven't done that or exposed that to teachers, I tell you, they will be absolutely really, really, it'll be a great moment for them just to see them interact. It's an interactive resource, which we didn't utilize as well. You've got your ability to annotate. Here we use, we've got a lot of iPads in the school, like many schools now. And we use Shobi as one of our tools to sort of give feedback. But what Myon what we can do is use our tools on the boards or on their screens to actually annotate, to get them to interact with the text, which we weren't using before. So that's been a great one, and just a way for us to get those texts that we know. Okay, we've got our reading ages from STAR. Let's connect that now. We know AR, it sits within our form time. My primary teachers, it sits as their responsibility as it had before. But what Myon does is that third wheel, it brings everything together. It's the space where we can provide high quality text, but also break down, and, there's voice recording on it. You can hear text, and for my students, the EAL, they need to hear things. So I think that's been a great tool. So I'd say it's like a three-pronged approach here. STAR for us is done 3 times a year. It's a non-negotiable that it sits, my secondary colleagues that are on here, they'll know seating plans. It sits on a student seating plan, so every teacher knows their reading age. But it's a little bit more than that. And, as I said to you, we use it as an intervention tool as well. So I think that's an aspect where we've got a lot more consistency in terms of, when students aren't making the progress that we see coming through STAR, how can we adjust our work in AR? How can we, use Myon to intervene with smaller groups? So we've been starting to look at ways we can do that as well, getting a small group together. COVID friendly, of course, everybody. All social distancing here where we are, and masks. So it's about how you pull them together and actually look at a text and unpick that and unpack that for them and show them the vocabulary, do pre-teaching. So, it's I said to you, it's like for us, it's been, a real firm part of the way we deliver a consistent approach, because we're a big school, we're an all-through school, and our students start with reading in that way from year 4. So everyone knows. Here you can see, this is something that we have in all year groups. Just as I said, when we're doing topics, what books are the key books we want students to read? So we have non-negotiables as well for students on what are the books they need to access, because they're core text for us, for that age group and that year group or that topic or that, area that they're doing.
When English is your second language, is a double whammy, really, isn't it, Michelle?
It is. And I think, they were frustrated because, before we really had a clear system, and actually a system that we were monitoring and intervening with, they were frustrated. So they just gave up. Boys weren't making progress anywhere near where they should be. And obviously that affected attainment. So what we've been able to do is, some of the strategies that we use to engage boys, girls are competitive as well, 100%, but boys, and particularly our boys, love a bit of competition. There's two great ones, some of my year 6 boys here, and that's what some of the teachers did there. They have this golden, you can see their AR words in the year 6 boys, because we're a segregated school from year 5 upwards. The boys and girls are taught separately. So, you can imagine some of the challenges sometimes for teachers when you've got 24 or 5 boys in front of you, trying to engage them in a text. So we do a lot of different ways. We have weekly competitions. It's a high priority for us. There'll be displays all around our school. And even even during COVID, in lockdown, I think that's where some of our work really came into fruition, where we could actually set up some really secure systems. Here is one of my colleagues, the little poster there about AR that gets released weekly, and because our boys particularly love the idea of words, not just how many books, because obviously as they get older, they don't read as many books because they're a bit bigger, aren't they? So they are obsessed by the word count. So as soon as we realise that, that's what we use as a competition factor, and they love that. That gets sent home every week. There's posters. There's these golden books. They love a bit of gold here, and you can see these are boys that these are just 2 boys. As they were doing some work, I went around and took that picture myself, and that for seeing them smile when they're doing that, that's all I need, and it's, and I'd say to you, it's really about the idea that everyone is involved, no matter what subject you're in, everyone has that at the heart of what they do. Every teacher is a literacy teacher. I can't say this enough, but I can tell you it's been incredible to watch. I was saying to Margaret the other day, to have an art teacher. So I had an art teacher come into my office the other day and said to me, Michelle, I just want to run through a few guided reading ideas I had. Now, and I said to Margaret, that sort of blew me away a little bit. And I was a bit smug, to be honest, because I thought, wow, here's a really skills-based subject, yet they're coming and intervening. Into Key Stage 3 classes she was doing, she was like, okay, I'm going to use these texts. This is the sort of activity. This is the word count I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to think. These are the tier 2, tier 3 words I'm going to break out. What do you think? Great, go
Amazing.
for it.
Yeah, fantastic. It's interesting. Someone's just put in the chat about how reading is more challenging to teach these days because of screen time, because children have access to, Zoomy, whizzy stuff online. Why would they read a book? And I must say, and I understand that Renaissance pay my salary, but I just think I want to share that it works. If you can say to a child, if you read a book, you can take a quiz. There is that incentive. And initially, if you need something like that, if you need that carrot dangling, then for goodness sake, use it and abuse it, because it will get them opening those books, in my experience.
I mean, we do things like we have in secondary, we have leaderboards. So you see how many quizzes people have taken, how many percent, and different forms have different awards according to what they want to do. But I think, and I say to people that is the key. Get it out of English. When it's not working, people say to me, "Oh, it's not working. I've had AR. It's just not working." I say, "Oh, it's sitting in the wrong department." It has to be, it's the. And I think some of the key things, like the star reader test that we do 3 times a year, the form tutor, it's just that little nuance. The form tutor takes the test with them. They do that test, not the English teachers. It's not scheduled in English. It's scheduled during form time, that we extend the form time and we do it then. And because then they take ownership, they take some nuance. So, when I've got my PT teachers, my PE teachers, my science teachers saying, okay, guys, this is your scores. We need to get better. What are we going to do as a form time? What are we going to do? What are we going to do differently? And that, you know, I think it's created a culture, and that was the shift, I would say to you, in the culture and the consistency, that everyone knew it was highlighted. It wasn't something that just someone did occasionally in this class.
And that stakeholder culture, I think, is important, because in the end, these children are going to be sitting exams. They are going to need to read their papers and questions and understand them. And if English is their second language, you've got to get them up to that level, whether you're a national curriculum English school or not. They're not going to dumb down the question, and in an effort to allow these children access to the question matter.
Formed over 3 decades ago,
today Renaissance is a world leader.
A key part of our success has been Accelerated Reader, the world's most popular personalised reading tool. Using Accelerated Reader is easy. Read a book, take an online quiz, get instant feedback on how to improve.
And so you said earlier, Michelle, that you still have an Ofsted hat occasionally, and obviously Ofsted isn't the mantra or the body that looks after schools in Dubai. So I'm assuming this is, if you're outstanding in all areas, that's good news.
So obviously we do have an annual inspection system, I said here, with our local sort of regulators, KHDA. We haven't had them. However, we are a British school overseas. So we also have a British school overseas inspection, which is, honestly, the framework is a little bit similar to what we would say in the UK is an independent school inspection. So, you're seeing, are you delivering a British national curriculum well, and are you doing it to the standard you would expect if your school was sitting in the middle of, the UK as well. So, and we had ours in March. It was on site. It wasn't virtual, everyone. It was on site, and we managed a huge team of inspectors. I think there was 10
wow.
Because it's such a huge school. So it was over, 3 days, and, It was obviously very successful for us, which we're really, obviously proud of. And, it's about the team behind that. But, this quote I just wanted to share with colleagues was just, about that, if you have consistency and the central focus on literacy and numeracy as well, numeracy is equally important. But if you can read and, you're literate, numeracy will come as well. And I think you can see here that, they're saying here that the subjects have benefited on the high quality sort of literacy programs. And what that whole, the second one is, the last sentence here is one of my favorite ones, is the embedding of literacy throughout the school supports accelerated programs. That's it, guys. I can't tell you, is that I've been ahead for nearly 19 years. I'm an Ofsted inspector. I can't tell you how important embedding literacy is across the curriculum and across the school, but having that consistency, that same language. Where we are a private school, and one of our beliefs is that we offer a world-class education. This was another quote from that inspection where, it recognises that, you do have to invest. And as I said to you, I've worked in local authority schools in the UK. We invested in AR. So it's a really, for me, it was a very cost-effective way. Here, I'm in a private school, so it's a different situation. But you can see here, that the investment in reading platforms, like AR, Accelerated Reader, Myon, and I said to you, Shobi is another one we use for marking and feedback. That's a whole nother story. But what that does is supports the world-class standards the school is achieving in terms of being able to, our students now have the ability, because they're literate, because we continue to drive their literacy standards, they can compete on an equal playing field with any student in the world. And I think that's it for me. I want to break down barriers. I don't want students to, I don't want teachers saying to me, all our students at EAL, it's all the boys, all the boys classes aren't doing it. Well, sorry, no, we've got to think about different ways to do it. So that's been a bit of the journey of SRS and reading and, the mantra that we have here.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it's such a lovely, positive story, and you can hear your passion and your obvious commitment to ensuring that the children at your school have this rich, varied, and suitable, which I think is such an important word when you're talking about children who haven't had English spoken to them from birth. And that makes such a difference in terms of everything that you have to almost undo in order to reintroduce and to get those sorts of standards. Absolutely fantastic.
And if your school uses Home Connect, parents can track progress through a secure website. For 35 years, Accelerated Reader has been motivating and supporting millions of children to read and inspiring a love of reading in every child. For more information, visit ranlearn.co.uk/parent-resources.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Renaissance Space podcast, please check out the Education Joining the Dots podcast from our colleagues at GL Assessment. Thank you.